Hello again, everyone. For Pro Wrestling Illustrated, it's time for the very first edition of Let's Go Down to the Ring. I am Gerry Strauss, and this is where we get to go deep, we get to go inside, we get to go in depth with the voices of professional wrestling that you know, that you love, and we have got such a great first time out here, our very first episode of Let's Get Down to the Ring, and we have got someone that we have gotten to know so well over the last few years. You know her from so many places, from Shine, from Capital Championship Wrestling, from her time in NXT and Ring of Honor. The list goes on and on. Of course, her own show, hashtag Let's Get Serial, and everywhere else that she's popping up each and every day, each and every week. She's here. Alyssa Marino. Hi.
Hi, Gerry. Thank you so much for having me on. This is awesome.
Look, thank you. Thank you so much for being on. You're the perfect first guest for the show. And, I really just want to explain it. And I know that a lot of people who are watching this show are going to, this is going to resonate with them as well, because you were the center of a lot of discussion at some point a few months ago. Sort of a debate, sort of a discussion about pro wrestling commentary and what it should sound like, maybe what it shouldn't sound like, maybe the direction that would be preferred to do justice to the pro wrestling world of today, of 2022 and beyond. And the reaction that you got and the reaction that conversation got was so profoundly amazing. There was such a passion and such an interest in weighing in one way or the other. And it really blew my mind to the point that it truly was the inspiration for this show and these conversations that we're going to have, because I can't remember a time in pro wrestling, and I'm pretty freaking old, but I cannot remember a time when people cared so much about this side of the product. Did you feel the same way? I mean, you were kind of in the eye of the storm, but did you feel like this was a really positive thing in the end?
In the end, I definitely think that there were a lot of words of support, a lot of different voices that got elevated throughout the conversation. Mm-hmm. I mean, my opinion is my opinion. There's going to be people that agree. There's going to be people that disagree. But I think that the amount of care that was shown by just people even caring to respond or to disagree vocally, that's great. But just the fact that people are paying attention, to me, it's always been the matter of, athletes in the ring are putting their bodies on the line. I always want to do justice to them. Mm-hmm. And I feel like there are gray areas of everything, 1,000%. But yeah, it was really amazing, not necessarily shocking, but really eye-opening to see how many people took part in that discussion, for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, drawing again from my aged experience, so to speak, like I certainly remember the days when, doing commentary work myself and starting out when there was no streaming products and there was really not as much YouTube content out there. And our job was kind of, I don't want to say invisible, but it certainly wasn't the top of the fans' priority. It wasn't what people were paying attention to. A lot of times we were kind of anonymous. We didn't get a whole lot of camera time. And if we did, it was just on tapes that people were trading or DVDs that they were buying. But now it's a whole different story. And you are sort of at the forefront, I think, of this generation where everyone can watch their product that they love very easily, and you are front and center of so many of the best ones. And I think that speaks to your passion. It speaks to the professionalism and just the skill that you bring to the table. Do you feel, do you kind of feel that? Do you feel like as your work continues to evolve and progress, so does your career, like based on that same growth?
I definitely think that first of all, thank you. That's incredible. There are so many really talented, incredible voices that are out there right now. And I think kind of just to even touch back on what you were saying about, when you were doing commentary, how it was very kind of like the invisible voice. Yeah. And I think that's to a degree, it's, commentary, we're not meant to be the stars, but it is it is something that the way people are consuming media and the way people are consuming wrestling, it makes sense. You know, people are hearing it more and more, and they're hearing these voices that they're becoming familiar with. And I think that that's a really beautiful part of it. I definitely think for me, I think it's so hard because a lot of the time it's just the right place and the right time. And I still have, you know, this terrible imposter syndrome where I think it's people are crazy, but they keep giving me chances to do things, which I'm very, very grateful for. And I think it's like wrestlers with matches. Every time I get to step in a broadcast booth with a new partner, I get to learn something new. Every time I take on a new challenge or project by myself, every time I interview a new person on my show, I'm learning more as I go. And that's fueling into these new opportunities and new connections with different people. So I definitely think that they go hand in hand. And it's honestly, when I look at it, I'm just really grateful to be part of this community of voices in the wrestling world.
And it's certainly at the forefront of it. You know, you've had an interesting career journey. I know you've done a lot of interviews. You and I spoke for a different outlet, I believe, last year, and we talked about your history and how you kind of got to this point. And we don't need to revisit your whole biography again, although it's a really good one. Someone needs to make a movie about it. but you've had such an interesting career journey because you kind of started in a place, and I know you had talked about like championship wrestling from Hollywood. You were able to cut your teeth in a place that had some level of quality TV production before heading off under the WWE umbrella and working for NXT for a time, and now, you know, exploding back all over the place. What do you feel about, I mean, how has that roller coaster been for you as far as structure goes? Because, you know, I've certainly experienced sort of the I guess you could say simpler, more basic, more lower budget levels of independent wrestling, where that video production is going to be very simple. You're not going to have an earpiece. You're not going to be produced. There's not probably going to be a format. There's nothing like that. You're just left to your own devices, to total freedom in many cases. And you've also kind of worked in the polar opposite, I'm sure, where there's been a lot of structure and a lot of demands and a lot of detail and a lot of direction. What has your experience been like in the places you've been working lately, and what do you prefer? Where's your comfort zone?
I can honestly say that I don't prefer either one. You know, wherever the opportunity is, I say yes, and then I adapt and adjust to whatever they need. But I will say that, and I mean, you hit the nail on the head. There is a certain amount of freedom that comes from working with more independent programs and feeling like, I mean, Capital Championship Wrestling is a great example. I got to work with Ella J on commentary, and it was one of her first experiences doing commentary. So to be able to kind of guide a new commentator is something that's been done for me on places like Championship Wrestling. And it meant so much to me to be able to share what I've learned throughout working with other people with her. That being said, I think that the guidance that you get on bigger productions is something that is really valuable. I think that it really can enhance the project instead of feeling like not necessarily the pressure is on the commentators, but feeling like you have that structure is kind of, and I'm very much, I love a script. I love to know what my plan is. I'm not super duper impulsive. I'm not the hugest improv fan. I actually think that commentary is something that got me used to improv, because you just kind of have to bounce off your partner and see what's going to happen. Because, you know, obviously we have no idea how things are going to unfold. But I think that having that little life raft of just in case, you know, you have a saving grace in your ear. I definitely can see the benefit of that as well. But, yeah, for me, it's wherever the opportunity is and whatever they need, I'll do it.
Cool. Now, you came from NXT, WWE land for a while, and I think it's almost become somewhat of a legend out in the wrestling fandom that there are all these rules. There's a a Bible, a scroll somewhere in the in the performance center that outlines all the things you're allowed to say and not allowed to say as a voice, as an announcer. I know you weren't really focused on commentary while you were there, but are there any tips or tricks or rules or just standards that you picked up while you were part of that system that have kind of followed you out of it, either whether it's something that you've decided to stick with or something that you're so happy to escape from?
The way you express it makes it sound really legendary and really exciting. Sounds like a national treasure kind of situation. Just like roll of all the rules. But I will say that there was a certain amount of, I think, just a professional tone, if that makes sense, of even at the most exciting moments of a match. And of course, sometimes I get carried away. Trying to keep a level of groundedness to my voice, if that makes sense. It was always kind of advised, even just vocally, to kind of dig in a little bit lower instead of like flying off and going to these high octaves when action was picking up. And I definitely think that that's something that I was able to carry with me. And as a vocalist in my background, I think that that's actually saved my voice on a lot of projects where they were a little bit, lower budget. We didn't have earpieces. We didn't have headphones. We just had microphones and we're trying to hear each other. I think that that's definitely helped me out in situations like that.
I got to tell you, I remember, these little memories stick with you, and thankfully I'm still doing some work to this day, but nothing like this anymore. I remember I got booked for a show. It's the solo commentator for the show. It was an outdoor show. I get there. They sit me at a table next to like an old school big fat camcorder, like the kind that you can fit the full VHS tape in and record right onto it. They're like, sorry, dude, we forgot to think about microphones, but we're just going to hit record. Just talk loud. And I was at the point where I still wanted to watch it back. So I eventually got the video back like weeks later. And I remember you could hear it was starting to rain a little and the wind and like all the elements. It was essentially like a 2-hour long America's Funniest Home Video.
But think about how much you learned from that experience, right?
I learned never to work there again. Yeah.
There's always a takeaway. There's always a takeaway.
You know what, though? And you could relate to this, I'm sure. There's that point when you get into this where, I mean, if you love it, I mean, you kind of have to, because that's why you would get into it. But there's that point in your life where anywhere with a microphone, right? Like if they're going to turn on a microphone for you, you'll be there. And so I probably would have gone back, sadly enough. But that's kind of the lot of all of us. At least for a time. You work in a lot of different environments now, a lot of different products. You're kind of all over the place in a really good way. What does the prep for a typical show, let's say it's a CCW show in Delaware, what's the prep look like, and how far back beyond the day of the event does it extend?
So CCW is a unique factor of that. We do it remotely. So we do it after the event. We are not on location. So the cool thing about that is that it's good and bad. Because normally being at an event, I've already done my prep work ahead of time, but I'm able to like talk to the talent. I'm able to take my notes, ask them questions, and do almost like a mini interview day of. Meanwhile, going back usually the week of, if I have never seen the person in a match before, I go and watch at least one of their matches. If it's a company that has storylines, like West Coast Pro is a great example. That show is going to be coming up on the 15th. I'm not sure when this is going to air, but the 15th, 14th, Friday, sorry. But I'll be there. So for that, they had storylines of things that were going on. So I went back and I watched the most recent event on IWTV to make sure that I have everything of what happened after the main event and how everything ended and when was the last time that this person was here and what did they do? How does that factor into what their match is set up to be on the upcoming show? So that'll usually happen the week of. With something like CCW, I'm usually reaching out 2 weeks to a week beforehand once I kind of have an idea of what the matches are going to be to actually email or direct message competitors. If I haven't worked with them before, what are your finishing moves? Does any of the moves you do have names? How would you describe your style? What's your background? What are the important things that you want us to get over on commentary? I try and give myself as much leeway as possible, just in case I don't hear back right away. Yeah, and then we are able to see the footage, call it, via Zoom, and then edit it all together.
Technology, 2022. I mean, I want to ask you, since you bring that up, because I know I've personally had the experience of calling a lot remotely after the fact, post-production, and I've always felt very challenged by something I think a lot of people don't think about: the lack of energy in the room, the lack of just being able to feel and kind of match your tone and your energy to the surroundings. It's really hard to come across on a screen sometimes. Is that something that you face, and how do you conquer that?
I definitely think it's one of those things where there's a certain vibe that's missing from being there live. But usually I think if we're just zeroed in on the matches, we can react pretty realistically to the action that we're seeing happen. We've equated it to, we're two friends that are sitting on our couch watching wrestling together. Oh my gosh, we're still going to have those reactions to big moves. We're still going to, banter back and forth about what we think about these competitors. Definitely, I think that the audience of, the third person in the match that's making the match happen, being the live crowd, is missing. But I definitely think that it's still very possible to have genuine reactions to what we're seeing.
Gotcha. That's cool. I mean, I think it's an acquired skill. I think, to be sure, to adapt to that. So
it is not easy. It is definitely, it is. Yeah, there's something to be said for being at a live event that just makes it easier to call upon that energy, that excitement.
Gotcha. Now, look, you're obviously someone who puts a lot of thought into this, and just by even some of the things that you've discussed with people on social media for the world to see, we know that you're very serious and analytical, and, as I said, passionate about the job. What are some things, that discussion aside, what are some things that you notice out there in the world, past, present, future, in the world of pro wrestling commentary, or even things that you've done in the past, habits, whatever, that maybe you've tried to, get rid of or avoid, or things that you've heard other people do, whether on purpose, by accident, or whatever, that you learn from? I mean, personally, I know I learn the most from listening to myself do stupid things, and I just learned not to do them anymore. Is that something you pick up when you listen to other people or yourself?
I think it's like you said, it's always the self-critique that gets me, and I get really aggravated with myself, but it's like you said, the best way to learn. And I think that one of the biggest eye openers that I had that finally made something that I had been working on for a while click was I had been working on a Shine event, and it was a competitor, Catalina Perez, who's incredible. And she had posted a 30-second clip of a sequence of moves that she had done during the match. And in the match, or in that clip, all I can hear is myself talking about the other competitor, because it was something, a point that I was stuck on that I needed to get out.
Yeah.
So I try to think about, okay, if this is something that an athlete is going to share online, I want to make sure that what commentary is saying is matching that. I never want it to be a situation where someone's like, oh, well, I have to make this a GIF because, the commentary is talking about something that's not related, or the commentary doesn't do me justice. Especially in those bigger moments, or when someone is really, doing their thing, I think that was one of the biggest eye openers where I'm like, wow, I really did not do justice to this clip that she was so proud to post online. So I think that really resounded for me, of not to get so caught up in a fun fact that I want to get out about somebody, when the other person is doing some amazing things.
You know, I think that's one of the two challenges that almost any commentator will run into early on when they're first starting out trying to figure things out. One is that it's knowing when to turn left or when to stay the course or staying on that course too long. The other one is falling on that crutch of just calling every single move because you're making feel like you've got it covered and you're doing a good job, and then you go back and you watch it back and it's just like white noise because all you're doing is saying things that the people can see. But it's just like that nervousness. I think in the beginning, I know I've felt it before. It just, that's where you go. You're like, okay, I need to hang on to this and hang on to this tight and just do that and get to the end of the match. Is that something that you have personally experienced from way back in the day?
I think something that it took multiple people telling me it. And I think maybe it was Lenny Leonard that was the most recent one that told me that it finally clicked, was not to get so lost in my notes. Because and like we discussed, I take a lot of notes. I like to have my research and background, but I would be so busy referring back to something that I was missing the action that was happening. Yeah. So I think that sort of along the same lines where it became white noise because there was something way more interesting happening. And I was just so locked in that I felt like I had to get this out. Mm-hmm. I think would be a big one for me. Most of my career that I've worked has been more of the color commentary side. So I never really got caught up in calling moves directly as I was seeing them. Yeah. But I definitely think that the distraction of having, not being over prepared necessarily, but feeling so locked into the fact that I had to get out every fun fact that I had written down.
Look, I remember the first time I learned the lesson of over planning and taking too many notes when I took this big batch of notes into a building and then it was bell time and the house lights went down and It was just the lights above the ring. And I'm like, oh, I'm not going to be able to see any of these for the entire show. So let me try to remember what I can. and that's it. And
but do you feel like that was a better, performance for yourself than if you had been kind of?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's funny because we talk about debate about what an announcer kind of should say, shouldn't say, should be, shouldn't be. But even in the realm of something as specific as sort of a quote unquote lead play-by-play announcer, there's so many different ways you can approach that job. There's so many different ways you can take it. And I mean, personally, I discovered a long time ago, I'm not a moves guy and I'm not like a deep stat guy. Like that's just not who I am as a fan and never was. So I don't have that knowledge just ready to throw out there, but I'm a story guy. I like to be able to infuse the emotion in the story and things like that. So you kind of have to figure it out and then figure out who your partner is if you're working with somebody and then kind of figure out how it all works together. Not an easy task either. But you've worked with a lot of different people. Have you managed to find a lot of great chemistry with those you've worked with?
I seriously have been so lucky in my career that I have worked with, honestly, incredible people. From Christian Cole was one of my first commentary partners that I worked with on a professional setting. And I think from there, if that hadn't gone well, it might have, I think, put a really bad taste in my mouth. And I know myself, I probably wouldn't have done it ever again. So the fact that like having that first experience, I mean, coming out of like Santino Brothers, where I had trained and done practice matches, to that being my first professional setting, I think I was very, very lucky that from the get, I have had nothing but really good partners that have all been able to teach me a lot. And never in a way where I ever felt like they were talking down to me or belittling me, but always in a way that they saw how much I cared. They cared equally as much, and they wanted to help me get better. I think, and I still do to this day. If I work with someone new, come intermission, headphones coming down. Good. Anything? Yeah. What do we like? What do we not like? What do we want to? Everything good? So I think that, there's always been just a really good chemistry with everyone that I've worked with.
Nice. Very nice. Is there anybody that you've either been around and gotten knowledge from who, is a commentator you admire, an influence, or someone you were able to work with directly, maybe even on a one-time basis, somebody that was a really special opportunity that sticks out in your mind as just an experience that you cherish?
I have multiple. So I forget which one came which one came first. But I had the opportunity to be part of the Evolve seminar back, I think, 2019, 2018. And I got to chat with Lenny Leonard. And I didn't get to call matches with him at that time, but I don't know what it was, but he saw something in me, and he sat down with me and spent so much of his time just answering all of my silly questions and really taking it upon himself to just share so much of his knowledge and so much of his wisdom and how he approaches things with me. That was huge. Getting a chance to work at Death Before Dishonor in Las Vegas, and not knowing until the day of that I was going to be able to be on commentary with Caprice Coleman and with Ian Riccaboni for one of the matches on Honor Club. That was an incredible moment that after the show had happened, I was able to reach out to Ian and get feedback from him. And I had, been able to send him matches. And he, again, just the fact that people were so willing to take time out of their day to not only watch a match and listen to a match, but to respond and give feedback and give critique. I think that was huge. Todd Kenley from Championship Wrestling, we worked on Primetime together, and he, just to be able to listen into him and be on the same broadcast team as him and listen to everything that he had to say and how he phrases things and how he approaches things. And with that was something where we had, people in our ears and hearing how he would adjust to the directives we were being given. That was such an incredible learning experience. But everyone has just been so genuinely kind and really generous with their time.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now
I feel very lucky.
Hey, and you're going to continue to, because you're still spreading your wings. You're just getting started. You're working here, there, and everywhere, and it's just going to get bigger and bigger. I want to ask you final question at this stage of the game. Can you name, if not one, maybe a couple, maybe a few, what matches that have you called that you hold in the highest esteem so far, and why?
Wow, it's always so hard, because it's like, as soon as someone says, think about some of your matches, like, you think about every single one of them.
Right. Well, that's why I always want to phrase it. You don't have to commit to these being your favorite matches of all time, but just a few really great ones that come to mind that, from your perspective as someone helping to call that match, special experiences for you.
So I will say that one, and it was one of the first moments it was actually pretty early in my career where I took the time to say, like, hey, wow, this was something special. It was actually at a Santino Brothers show, and it was my home base, and maybe that's why it made it a little extra special. But it was Ray Rosas and Jake Atlas for the Santino Brothers Championship, and there was this entire history and story that we were able to tell between, why there was friction between the two, and how, Joey Chaos, the head trainer and owner of Santino Brothers, how he played into it and how he was a father figure for both. Oh my gosh. Like, it was just, and of course everyone in the match delivered, then and back, but just the fact of how we on commentary were able to tell that story that people at home on YouTube didn't know. Maybe the SoCal crowd in attendance had an inkling, but I think that knowing how special that backstory was really, really amazing to be a part of. I think also it was at a Primetime Live, and it was Mike Bennett challenging Nick Aldis for the 10 pounds of gold. That was another really special one because of the backstory, because of the importance of family, and how Bennett was really, putting everything on the line, and for the honor of his wife and his children, to make them proud, to come back from adversity. That was such a beautiful story. Yeah. And I think more recently, a really special one was Kylan King becoming the inaugural CCW champion. That was a really beautiful moment that I think we were able to convey the importance and the gravity of that situation.
The world has figured it out, man. We're storytellers, and you're one of the best going today. And
Oh, thank
clearly,
you.
we can see why. We can see why because you can see it in your eyes. This is again, you can get all the details right. You can have your 10 pounds of notes and bring it to the table. But being able to bring that emotion and those stories to the people is what's so cool, I think, about this job. And thank you so much for spending time with us here on the first episode and telling us your experiences just getting started doing it.
Thank you so much. And hoping for many more, hoping for new opportunities. So I really appreciate you asking me to be part of this. This is going to be a really cool series. I'm excited to check out more.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you guys for checking us out here on the very first edition of Let's Go Down to Ringside. Make sure that you subscribe because there's a whole lot more coming. And of course, a whole lot coming in general from your buddies here at PWI. So thanks, guys. Thank you, Alyssa. And we'll see you all down the road.